Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am finally back from my 8 days, 7 nights adventure in Egypt. So this video is going to be extremely Egypt packed. If you're interested in Egypt or thinking to go to Egypt very soon, in particular with a budget, I'm pretty certain this video is going to be super helpful to you. But before I start, please make sure you hit the subscribe button below if you have not. Lots of videos are coming, so let's start it. First and foremost, where is Egypt? Egypt is located in North Africa, as you can see in the map. Currently, in where I'm based in Britain, there are only 2 airlines operating direct flights between these 2 places, namely British Airways and Egypt Air. If you want to save money, you're more than welcome to consider transit by one of the southern European cities like I do to save some money, as long as the layover time is not crazy. I have to mention the direct flight between UK and Egypt takes around 5 hours. Faster if you're coming from the UK, longer if you're traveling back from Egypt. Why you should visit Egypt? Very simple. You heard about people say that you should visit Egypt at least once in your lifetime, and you really cannot relate to these words unless you see the pyramids yourself. It's spectacular, it's enormous, it's unforgettable. You really should visit at least once and embrace the rich and enormous histories of Egypt. Once you made up your mind to go to Egypt, the next question is when? In fact, now is one of the best time for you to visit Egypt because the official currency, Egyptian pound, is a lot weaker than before. That means that you will be able to save a lot more money than people who traveled to Egypt in the past. The next question would be, which month would be considered ideal to go to Egypt? First thing to remember is Egypt is very hot, so people, in order to avoid the heat, would possibly choose winter to go. This also means that winter is the peak season for tourists in Egypt. That also means that you will probably see the price go up around that time. So to avoid paying more, I would suggest that you think about early spring or end of summer to visit Egypt. But bear in mind, when my boyfriend and myself visited Egypt, the temperature there was already over 30 degrees in early March. So potentially one of the downside of visiting Egypt outside the winter framework is that the temperature would still be high, but would be a lot better than that in the official summer of Egypt. Then the next question is, how long should you stay in Egypt? My advice to first-timer is you should, if you can, allocate around 10 days for Egypt, and that should be enough to cover the capital city Cairo, Giza, where pyramids are located, the famous pyramids, and then Alexandria, a seaport city located in the north, and then Luxor, where New Kingdom was formed, and finally Aswan. These are some of the most famous cities in Egypt, and that should be enough to make your trip truly unforgettable. When you try to visit those places, you should be prepared to take domestic flights to travel from one point to another. The reason is because Egypt is a fairly big country. If you don't travel by air, you will probably spend an entire day, if not longer, on a train to commute. I would encourage you to look into the domestic flight. The good news is the domestic flight is fairly affordable and it takes very short time to reach the destination. For instance, from Cairo to Luxor, it only takes about an hour for you to arrive. So it's a very good deal. You should look into this. I must say though, this itinerary is designed for people who want to embrace the rich and enormous history of Egypt. If you are someone who's into like a resort holiday or a true adventure, then possibly you should look into the places around Red Sea where you can dive, or somewhere in the middle of the desert, for instance the famous black and white desert, where you can potentially camp there a night or two and experience what is it like in the middle of nowhere. After you arrive in Cairo, waiting for all the adventure ahead, very important, apart from using the toilet, is to ensure that you go to a local telecommunication counter at the airport, possibly Orange, possibly Vodafone, to get yourself a local SIM card. The reason being that is because in Egypt, there's so many points without Wi-Fi connections, possibly including your accommodation, unless you stay in a 4- or 5-star hotel. What that means is that you will have to rely on your data every now and then, if not at all times. Our observation during our stay in Egypt is that if you purchase 10 gigabyte, you ended up using 5 gigabyte only, unless you don't use social media. We don't understand why, but according to the text message we have received, it indicates that the social media would consume twice the usage of a normal internet usage. So you should consider doubling the data you usually need, unless you're not a social media user. The other reason why it's so important to get yourself a SIM card at the airport is our observation is the one at the airport seems to be the best. We have wandered around in the Cairo city and we realized that the deal we found were not really any better than that at the airport. So you should secure the best deal whenever you can, and that is the one at the airport. One final thing for you to remember is you probably have the tendency only to get data. You don't really worry about having enough minutes to call or to text. I would highly recommend you that in this case in Egypt, you ensure you get a SIM card with a working local number, because trust me, there were times that if WhatsApp does not work or any other messenger app fails to work, you will have to rely on the traditional method. After you're all set with your number and data, the next thing you'll probably think about is how can you get to your hotel? How can you get around in Cairo? Very important. Make sure you have Uber on your phone and is functional before you arrive. You should always use Uber to get around in the city unless you're taken care of by a tour guide with their private hired driver. This is because, firstly, scams are unfortunately very common in Egypt. If you randomly hail a taxi on the street and the driver would offer a price maybe much higher than you expected, with a language barrier and also you being tourist, you are in a very vulnerable position to argue with the driver. This is why it's important you can pay at an agreed price, possibly using card, and that's why Uber is the best. The other reason why you should use Uber is because Uber is a global company. It has to take some responsibility hiring the individuals as driver. If you ever need to contact the driver for whatever reason, or your family have to, at least Uber will be able to help you locate. The other reason why you should really use Uber is because the local traffic should be very different from what you're used to. You shouldn't really try to be a guinea pig just during your short stay in Egypt to see how great you are or how adaptable you are as a car driver. It's not worth it. It's best to rely on a local driver who knows how to get around in the city in a local way for your own safety.